At Air New Zealand, air traffic controllers' lunch breaks force the airline to cut regional flights, and John Key gives his MPs a bollocking. Details soon on New Zealand's most comprehensive half hour of news and information. That's just 5 minutes away on Radio Live.
You'd want to comment on this, Bernard. You could eat your lunch while you brought the planes in, couldn't you?
That's right. I just look out the window, just point a bit, you know.
How hard can it be? You think Nick Smith making it compulsory for supermarkets to charge 5 cents for plastic bags is a good thing?
On economic principles, it is a good idea to put a tax on to deter people from using something. And I can see why you might want to get rid of plastic bags. And I actually think...
Bernard, let me just tell you something. In Ireland, they had a ban on plastic bags, which they think is very successful, until they realised that the sale of bin liners went up 4,000%. Now, talk about people bribing politicians. It'll be the bin liner manufacturers that are paying backhanders to the politicians.
That was obviously a bad implementation of a tax, yeah. Well, I think sometimes a tax to deter some things, like, for example, tobacco and alcohol, is a good idea. And it works. For tobacco, it's one of the major reasons why tobacco consumption has fallen.
No, it's those damn pictures with the old gummies with it. And they reckon that's the same person. It's their teeth, their feet, the whole thing. Dow's tanked.
It is. It's down more than 300 points as we speak. This is all because General Motors and Chrysler look like they're going to go bankrupt. Last night, Barack Obama did something unusual. He said no when someone asked him for money. And he said no more money for GM and Chrysler until you get your act together. Come back in a month or 2 months, a month for Chrysler and 2 months for General Motors. Come back with a decent plan. I'm not going to give you any money in the meantime. Oh, and by the way, the CEO of General Motors, out the door. So Barack Obama is basically telling the two big car companies to get their act together inside a month, or they will be allowed to go bankrupt. So the whole of the Dow is down as people finally get into their heads that the two biggest car companies that employ tens of thousands of people, and of course are just the end of a line of a big string of car parts manufacturers, and then there's all the dealers on the other side. This is a bad news for the US economy, but I think Barack Obama is doing the right thing. And this is the capitalist way to fix failing companies. You let them go bankrupt. And you can try and bail them out as much as you want, but this just wasted 6 months. He's already done a couple of bailouts for the car companies. It didn't work. And now he's having to bite the bullet and say, okay, you probably will go bankrupt.
The whole car manufacturing in the world's changed with this Indian they reckon it's like the TARDIS inside this $3,500 car. They reckon it's fantastic. So if they're making this Indian car for $3,500, General Motors, I mean, they can't compete. India will manufacture the world's cars in the future.
Particularly if it's a time-travelling car.
Well, no, I don't mean it's like the TARDIS that seems a lot bigger inside. It's not actually, it's not like Back to the Future just yet, but that's...
No, you're right. And one of the reasons is, and I just discovered this morning, the average wage for a car worker in the States is $46 an hour. So that's almost $100 an hour. So no wonder they're going bankrupt.
No, and most of them are asleep. There's a very good book called Rivet Head about a guy that was on the production line at General Motors, and it was extraordinary, the arcs they got up to. Tell me your second story, because I've got your piece of paper and your internet thing as well. What's the second big story?
Well, we watch closely how much the banks are lending to each sector, and the numbers came out yesterday showing that farm lending is still growing very strong, up more than 20% from a year ago. You wouldn't believe it. The dairy payouts
not with $5.10, yeah.
Yes, the dairy payouts tanking. Farmers are buttoning down the hatch as well. The banks are still lending the money hand over fist, and eventually it has to slow down because there's a bubble building there in farmland as well. But
do you think the price of farmland will come down 30% along with housing? Probably more.
Probably more, because it's more elastic, as they say. It tends to move a lot more dramatically on the up or on the down than house prices. The other thing is the banks have reduced their lending to business. Now, this confirms what a lot of people have been saying, but the banks have been denying that if you're a small to medium business, you get to a bank these days, the bank will say no. And the banks, though, have been saying up until now, no, our doors are open, we're still lending, no worries. Well, the raw numbers show that they're not lending extra. In fact, their lending fell to non-farm businesses. But the other thing is lending to housing has actually been very weak in February. There's been a lot of talk around the real estate circles about a rebound in the housing market.
It's not going to happen.
Not when the banks are only lending an extra $250 million or so. Remember, for the last 5 Februaries in a row, the banks lent an extra $1.1 to $1.3 billion in a month. This time, just $250 million.
Thanks very much, Bernard Hickey. It's 7 o'clock. Here is Hillary with the World at 7.
From the Worldwide Resources